In today's Ask Sonia, we're answering the question, why do I feel so freaking tired? Even though I've been told that my thyroid is normal, that I'm on the right amount of medication, and yet I still feel thyroid-y. I'm still exhausted. I'm sleeping at night and I don't wake up refreshed. I'm having a nap during the day and it doesn't give me any more energy. When I work out or if I do exercise, I'm exhausted and I feel like I've lost a whole heap of fitness, and yet it doesn't feel like that is my truth. And I might be exhausted the next day, even after I've exercised. Might even be struggling to remember common words. I just can't place them and I can't think things through, and I don't remember easy facts. If that sounds like something that you're experiencing, then the first step is to make sure that you are actually on the right amount of medication, that you've had your thyroid tested thoroughly and you've looked at your thyroid health from all angles. Now, I've got a specific video on that, so if you've not watched that, please go check that out, because that's really the first step that you've got to get in right and in balance. Now, if you know that you're on the right amount of medication and you have had very thorough thyroid testing, you've had your T3 and your reverse T3 tested, and yet you still feel tired and foggy and not rested after a long sleep, then this is the video for you. These are the common nutritional deficiencies found in the research and that I find in my practice and in my own body as well as someone with Hashimoto's hypothyroidism. And it's a cluster of nutrients that when they're low in our body, we say that the person is anemic. And so when you hear the word anemia, what do you think? Most people think iron. Oh, I must be low in iron. Well, anemia is more than that. And particularly if you've got a thyroid issue, anemia can relate to B12. It also can relate to iron, which you probably knew about, but it also relates to a nutrient called folate. And most women only think of folate when they're pregnant, but actually we have a need for folate even when we're not pregnant. It's a really important nutrient for us, and when it gets low, it can make us feel thyroid or leave us feeling thyroid-y. So let's start off by talking about how you test them, what your reference range should be, because it's not enough for me if your reference range just says that it's normal on a blood test or that a doctor's looked at it and said you're within the reference range. You actually need to be optimal, and we have some scientific research that tells us what the optimal levels actually are, so I'll share that with you. And then we want to talk about supplements or food, like where are you going to get these nutrients? And then finally, if it's of interest to you, we'll talk about why people with Hashimoto's hypothyroidism tend to be low in these nutrients. It's really not about the food we eat, it's what our body does with that food when it's inside us. And I kind of think it's fascinating, but I'll leave that right to the end just in case you're not as interested with it and you just want me to get to the meat in the sandwich, so to speak. You want me to get to the facts and get to them quickly. So let's get started with what anemia is. So when you don't have enough iron or ferritin, B12 or folate in your body, you can be anemic. Now, more than likely, you have had at some point very recently a red blood cell test done. You've had your hemocrit looked at, you've had your red blood cell volumes looked at, or this might also be called a full blood count or a complete blood count. Often on a blood test, it's written as FBC or CBC or just red bloods. So often they can come back as looking normal, but actually we need to dive more deeply. And if you have Hashimoto's hypothyroidism, please make sure that your medical professional is actually testing these further. And you actually want a specific B12 test. You want a specific iron panel done where you actually see a reference for something called ferritin, because it's ferritin that we're so interested in with thyroid conditions. And then the final one is you want to have a look at your folate values. So for me, it's not enough when someone comes to me with a complete blood count or a red blood cell and they say, look, I've been told that I'm normal and here is my test. I actually want to go further than that. And what comes up really commonly is seeing values, say, for example, like let's start with B12. When B12 is low, which is very common in Hashimoto's as well as in hypothyroidism, and it's estimated just a little under 20% of people with Hashimoto's have a condition called pernicious anemia. anemia, which is where they really struggle to even make B12 in their body. And even if you don't have Hashimoto's, you just have hypothyroidism, more than likely you have a low B12 level, just for a reason that I'm going to talk about at the end, to do with how your body is actually processing the foods that B12 comes in. If you're a vegan and you're not supplementing wisely and intelligently, unfortunately, you can commonly be low in B12, and as can vegetarians, because it's a nutrient that's found primarily nowadays in our red meat. It didn't used to be the case, but nowadays that's where most of us actually get our B12 from. So when you get a B12 test done, you're actually looking for values that are 500 and above. And in fact, some authors on this topic actually think 700 and above is the best reference range. Here in Australia, we see on a lab test, when you have a blood test done for B12, you'll get your lab test back. Always get your lab tests. Don't just let someone tell you, say that they're normal. Actually ask for your lab test. Keep a copy, have a folder, and keep a copy of it. Go get it and have a look at it and check these numbers for me. So in Australia here, the labs can have anywhere from 200 to 700 or 150, sometimes 180 actually, sometimes up to 450 in terms of a reference range is normal. I find commonly people under 500 can actually have symptoms of low B12, and that's particularly brain fog, depression, low mood, feeling a little clumsy. They might walk into doors a little bit more frequently. Things might fall out of their hands and fall on the ground. They might even get pins and needles or numbness in the fingers and toes. So, I mean, that's a pretty broad spectrum of things that can be going on in your body. But for most thyroid people, they're most concerned with the brain fog and the fatigue that B12 brings. So I gave you the lab reference ranges, and honestly, from lab to lab, these can vary quite wildly. Anyone under 300 will generally start to display some symptoms of low B12, but I find I commonly get people with lab references at 180 or at 200 with quite profound fatigue and brain fog, and when we get their reference range up over the 500, 550, sometimes even to the 700s, they feel like it's a miraculous change for them and they become very wedded to their B12 supplement. So if you start supplementing B12, what kind of supplements should you look for? Because when you have a thyroid condition or you're hypothyroid, I want you to get a specific type of B12 supplement. The best way to supplement B12 is to take something in a form that is called sublingual. And all that means is under the tongue. So you usually get drops or a spray or a tablet that dissolves, and you just pop it under your tongue and you leave it there for a couple of seconds. You don't wash your mouth out with water or food for a minute or two. It's not terribly hard. And then that will actually get straight into your bloodstream where you need it. And people tell me they feel almost instantaneously more alert in the brain and more sharp in the brain. The reason why I don't want you to take a swallow tablet is because often when there's Hashimoto's in particular, there might be a condition called pernicious anemia where you really struggle to make B12 out of your supplements. So I kind of want to bypass your stomach altogether because it might be the root cause of what's actually going on for you. So I would like it to be in this kind of sublingual form. A lot of my clients also really like to get a B12 shot. So they actually get a shot of B12 in their arm or in their butt, and they find that that kind of gives them an instantaneous benefit. So whichever way works for you, I find actually both are pretty effective. The shot or the injection is obviously a quicker resolution, but the sublingual form, so the under the tongue form that you take kind of every day for a few months, once a year, seems to work extremely well as well. And it can be a bit cheaper for people in terms of an option, easier to manage. They don't have to make appointments. You know, there's a whole lot of benefits for it. And actually the research has compared ingested B12 versus injections B12, and both have seemed to be having a pretty good outcome as long as the dosage level is right. So what kind of dosage do I like? Well, for my clients, depending on how low their B12 got, I like to get into a pretty hefty dose. I usually do 5,000 micrograms of a form of B12, which is called methyl B12, which means that I know that this B12 is going to be super active for them. Anytime I give someone a supplement that has a methyl in it, so methyl B12, I always just make sure to say to them, if they feel an increase in anger or any intrusive thoughts, to stop the supplement straight away, to seek some advice, and then if they do decide to start again at a lower dose, and just make sure that that supplement wasn't the concern for them. But B12 is generally a pretty safe supplement. So the next thing that we want to talk about in terms of common nutritional deficiencies when you have Hashimoto's or hypothyroidism is actually that of ferritin. And ferritin is the stored form of iron. Now, please hear this warning and really make sure you take it on board. Never supplement iron without having a blood test of your iron and your ferritin level. Because if we just assume that you have low ferritin and low iron and we give you ferritin and iron, and actually that's not the problem, we can cause more problems than you had to start off with. Giving someone iron when they don't need it is really quite damaging. So we want to see your iron test. I'm not so interested in iron. It really only tells me what you've eaten or supplemented in the last sort of day or two. I'm very interested in something called ferritin. And ferritin on a reference range has quite a wide reference range. It'll be something around, say, 30. I've even seen it go down to 18 or 20 and can be up to 150 or 200. Now, I find most of my clients feel better at around 90, especially for thyroid populations is where we feel the best in terms of as women and our energy level when our ferritin is at 90. Anything under 50 can start to see an increase in hair loss. So when iron gets low, let me correct myself, when ferritin gets low, the stored form of iron gets low, we start to notice that our hair falls out. We start to notice that we're short of breath when we're walking up a flight of stairs. We might feel that we're exercise intolerant, so we've lost some fitness. We're feeling really tired the next day, whereas we never used to. We're very tired. We're sleeping long periods of time at night. When you get your ferritin up near over 50 and hopefully even to 90, you generally sleep less if that's the reason why you're tired. You have much more energy when you're exercising. You're not as short of breath. And you just feel so much better and your hair starts to grow. Now, anytime we talk about hair loss and hair growth, always kind of factor in a 3-month delay. It takes you about 3 months for your hair to actually shed and then re-get enough nutrients and then regrow. So, there's always a bit of a time lag with that. More use your energy in that short of breath and your sleep as a better and faster and clearer indication of whether that supplement's working for you. I generally only like people supplementing an iron supplement for 3 months before I make sure they get retested, because like I said before, I'm always concerned that I push people too high with iron. And like I said, you can cause as many problems being high iron as you can being low iron. And so every time I say iron, I mean an iron supplement, but I'm really looking at the ferritin as the measure that I'm using to see if someone has enough stored iron in their body. Ferritin is what we call stored iron. Now, in terms of iron supplements, they famously cause constipation. And let's face it, when you have Hashimoto's hypothyroidism, we have a tendency to be constipated anyway. So the last thing we need is something that's constipating. So I always look for my iron supplement in a form called iron bisglycinate. Now I'm going to write this on the screen beside me. So if you don't understand my accent, check out how it's written for the form. And a woman needs generally 12 to 16 milligrams of iron a day just to keep her iron and ferritin level steady. And so you've just got to think, if you're quite low, you might actually need a little bit more than that to start off with. I usually start people off as a minimum of 24 milligrams of iron bisglycinate, just to start them off with and see how quickly they respond. I test at 3 months. how much of a difference have we made to that ferritin? Have I got them up near 90? And if not, we keep supplementing after that. Now, you don't need to supplement iron every day. There's some recent studies came out that found that people that supplemented their iron every second day actually got the same level of lift in their iron and their ferritin levels as someone who supplemented every day. So it's kind of a waste of effort. I mean, I certainly don't enjoy taking supplements, so any day that I don't have to take a supplement is a good idea. And also it's a bit cheaper because you're not having to supplement every day. The only thing is, and I find this happens a lot with my clients, and it really happens with me, is when I'm not supplementing something every day, I forget which day of the week I'm supplementing and which day of the week I don't. So if you choose a strategy of supplementing every second day, give yourself some sort of reminder. Like, I'm a big fan of getting a sheet of paper and putting Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday on it, and then actually listing down what supplements I'm taking each day and then just ticking it off. And then I photocopy that each week and stick it up there. So I only have to do the work once. Otherwise, I forget what I'm taking, when I'm taking, what I took. Did I take that this morning? Did I forget? I don't remember. So, and if you're going to do that with iron every second day, it might actually happen. And then the final one that I want to talk about is folate, serum folate levels. Now, it's not something that you hear people investigate a lot unless they're wanting to fall pregnant or they've just fallen pregnant. You know, we're always concerned about a pregnant woman's folate levels. But actually, when you are hypothyroid or have Hashimoto's, it's quite common that I see folate levels in the normal reference range, but not optimal. So what I would consider a low normal reference range. Now, folate can be obtained from our food. It's pretty easily found in any B vitamin, and a lot of people with Hashimoto's hypothyroidism have already put themselves on a B vitamin trying to get a little bit more energy. But I would be very cautious about the type of folate you're getting. I really only like to see a methyl folate version or a folinic acid version in terms of folate. I don't like seeing folic acid for someone with hypothyroidism or Hashimoto's as a way for them to get their folate. So folate is B9, by the way. I haven't mentioned that already. It's another way of saying B9. And there's all these different ways that you can get folate in a supplement. You know, you can get it in methyl folate or folinic acid or folic acid. Now, folinic and methyl, tick. If they're in your supplement, fantastic, keep going. But if you look at your B vitamin and you see in there B9 folic acid, well, I'd prefer that's not the form you take, because you may not be able to get the full benefit of that. And it might be causing you to feel a little bit more anxious than actually what you need to or want to be feeling. So I like people on the more refined versions of folate, as I just explained. So I hope that helps. This is what we talked about. We talked about anemia, and we talked about the 3 anemias, B12, iron. But when we talk about iron, I'm very interested in your stored iron, which is called ferritin, and your folate or your B9 levels. And I said that at the end that I would describe why it is that when we have Hashimoto's or we have hypothyroidism, we tend to be low in these nutrients. And personally, I find this fascinating, and I love to do it with all the ladies and my clients who see me who have hypothyroidism and Hashimoto's, and that is test their stomach acid, because it is a well-known fact in the scientific literature that people with hypothyroidism tend to have low stomach acid. And unfortunately, it gets quite confusing because low stomach acid often leads us to experience heartburn and reflux, feeling a sense of warmth here, or if you lie down straight after you eat, feeling really uncomfortable, maybe even feeling like a little bit of reflux or vomit in your mouth or a sour taste in your mouth after you eat. All those symptoms, when we describe them to our chemist or our pharmacist or our GP, often leads us to being given a stomach acid lowerer. So something that will actually lower our stomach acid, and that actually does work to relieve the symptoms. The only thing is, what might be causing it, particularly if you've got Hashimoto's or hypothyroidism, is low stomach acid. So I like people to test. And there's a really good home test you can do to check out your stomach acid. Now, this video has already been really long, so I'm not going to put the stomach acid test here. I'll do it in a separate one, but just look for stomach acid test, and I'll put the link down below if it's ready to go, and then just go check that out. It's pretty quick, and you can do it at home and check if yours is actually low. But we know that with hypothyroidism and Hashimoto's that we tend to have low stomach acid, and it means that we're not breaking our foods down properly. Particularly, we're struggling with our protein structures. And I find this really commonly. As women age, we tend to avoid meat-based products. And when I say to someone, are you vegetarian or avoiding meat because you don't like it? Or is it a philosophical, or is it ethical? There's no judgment from me. I don't mind. I just need to understand as your practitioner why you're doing that. And a lot of women say, I hadn't even realized I was following a vegetarian diet. I didn't do it deliberately. I just find that when I eat meat, it just kind of, boom, sits here and it's heavy and it doesn't digest, and I go to bed at night and it repeats on me, and I just don't like that feeling anymore. If that's happening, more than likely your stomach acid is a little low. And so you're struggling to break down these complex protein structures. Now, you don't need to eat meat to get the amount of protein that you need in your day out of it, but it certainly makes life a little easier when it comes to keeping your B12 and your iron levels high. But for me, the interest in finding that out is that whether you're eating meat or whether you're getting your protein from legumes and vegetables, it doesn't matter. There's still complex protein structures. And if you've got low stomach acid, whether it's meat or a legume or a vegetable, your stomach is going to struggle to break that protein down. So it means when the food goes on its journey in your beautiful digestive tract, which is really quite long, that it maybe never gets broken down well enough for you to get full advantage of the beautiful quality food that you're eating. And I find this a really common issue with a lot of people, that they either struggle with reflux and so they're on stomach acid lowerers, or they're avoiding the heavy proteins because they don't feel good in their body. And so what's happening is they're actually getting low in not just the iron, the B12 and the folate, but they're getting low in general across any nutrient that's contained in their protein forming foods, because their body just can't rip those nutrients out of the protein so it's able to be absorbed elsewhere. So that's something that I really want you to investigate. And like I said, I find it fascinating because again and again and again in clinical practice, I see this happen. It's a really common phenomena. So like I said, go check out the video on how to test your stomach acid if that's as interesting to you as it is to me. Otherwise, I would love to hear from you. What is your question? What would you like me to answer? Until we speak again, stay well. See you later. Bye-bye.